right, everybody. Welcome to another segment of the Compliance Guy podcast. My name is Sean Weiss, and as always, I just want to take a moment to say thank you to each and every single one of you for taking time out of what I know is an extremely busy day to listen in to what my special guest for the segment have to say and to engage with us after the podcast is over to provide us with your feedback, ask additional questions, and to really help us spread the word about what's going on in not only the regulatory compliance world, but also the business of medicine world, because the business of medicine and regulatory compliance intersect. And a lot of times they don't always line up. They don't always run parallel to each other. So it's critical for us to be able to take those topics that are prevalent, not only for the right here and right now, but those that are going to have a significant impact on you and your operations in the future. So today, I am so excited to have on not only an individual who is a very good friend of mine, but he's somebody that I have really probably over the last 16, 17 years found to be just such an incredible wealth of information and just a tremendous leader in the healthcare space. And that individual today is Mr. David Zetter. Just a quick background for those of you that don't know David, and I would say it's probably really hard for people not to know who David Zetter is, considering his prevalence in the market space, his continuous blogging, being interviewed, his lectures, and his newfound position in one of the best societies for management and healthcare business professionals. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But a little bit about David. He is the founder and president of Zetter Healthcare, and they are based out of Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. And David, and I'm sure he's going to tell you that he can't believe it, he's been in healthcare now for 30 years, focusing on operational and regulatory components tied to medical practices, hospital systems, and integrated delivery health systems. Many actually recognize David nationally for his presentations and his expertise. And for me, I look at him as sort of a master Jedi in provider enrollment and credentialing, among a whole host of other things in the healthcare space. David truly excels in revenue cycle management, credentialing, and contracting, compliance, coding, and documentation. And the fact is that people really see David as an expert on Medicare. And it's not only by his clients, but his consultant colleagues, like myself, across the entire country. David has evaluated existing ambulatory care facilities and practices with respect to patient flow, operations, the use of ancillary services, and financial considerations, as well as developing strategic plans to improve profitability and production. Again, David's activities in management and compliance include physician practices, IDTFs, hospitals, ASCs, pharmacy, DME, and really just about any type of facility that you could think of, which includes coding and broad-based regulatory issues. So with that said, it is my privilege and my honor to be able to sit down and spend some time with my good friend, David Zetter. David, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking time out of what I know is an extremely busy schedule to sit and chat with me and to share your knowledge with our listeners.
Sean, thanks for having me. Pleasure being here. Much respect for you, my friend, and your podcast. So yeah, very anxious to do this.
Well, that's great. Hopefully you feel the same way at the end of this show that you do at the very beginning, and it's not just your anxiousness doesn't turn to anxiety. So
no, it'll be fine.
So I was telling David right before we got started, I get an opportunity to see each and every single one of my guests. And I was explaining to David, he is looking really good these days. He's looking fit, toned, and tanned. So life is good. Things are rolling down the track for him. And again, you won't meet a better individual and a more broad-based, knowledge healthcare leader. I don't often refer to people as consultants because I think anybody can hang up a shingle and call themselves ABC consultant. I look at people like David Zetter and a lot of the folks that I have on my podcasts truly as healthcare leaders. And the reason why I have folks on this show is to give you all, the listeners, exposure to individuals that you might not otherwise have an opportunity to hear from. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. And one of the first things that I want to obviously jump into, David, because I know it's really exciting for you. Hopefully it's exciting. I'm sure there's some headaches that go with it as well. Um, but you've been in healthcare for 30 years and, probably more than 30 years now. And I'm sure you blinked and you're thinking to yourself, how in the world did that happen?
Yeah, what's even more interesting is that, geez, I had an entire career before I got into healthcare, and I'm trying to figure out how both of those happened. I didn't think I was that old, but I guess I am.
It's interesting because a lot of people find healthcare as sort of their second career, especially going through downturns in the economic cycles, going through pandemics like what we just came through and what we're to a degree still sort of working our way through, right, with the public health emergency tied to COVID
Sure.
19. And I think it's really interesting that so many people are coming into our industry from other industries, from the banking and finance sector. They're coming from distribution. They're coming from, a whole variety. And they get into healthcare. And I think there's a level of shock and disbelief for just how different this space is than pretty much any other industry that I can think of.
Oh, absolutely. There's tons of things going on. It constantly changes. You have to keep reading to stay on top of everything. Actually, I don't know how anybody, I mean, you and I are both compliance guys. Just to stay on top of that information alone is nearly impossible.
Yeah.
And that's without dealing with anything else in the industry.
Yeah. I mean, I tell people all the time, especially, and I'm sure you run into this with these, small physician practices, the 1 doctor to 5 doctor practices. And, they say, well, John's going to be, or Mary's going to be my, compliance officer, but they also, are responsible for the role of practice administrator and they oversee our, back end business operations. I mean, how unrealistic is that?
Well, the way I see it, and I've communicated to many people, especially vendors that I work with, practices nowadays are doing everything they can to unlock the doors in the morning and then hopefully lock the doors in the evening at a reasonable hour where they can get home and, have a quality of life as well. It's difficult. Every day, everybody is just running around with their heads cut off, trying to keep up with all the changes that are happening. I mean, COVID pretty much threw it against the wall this year or last year and, just basically put everybody down for the most part. So everybody's scrambling, trying to figure out what they're going to do. So on top of just trying to run their business, now you've got problems with, geez, do you even have a business? And will you have a business in the future? So, I mean, many things are happening right now. There's still a lot of people evaluating their businesses, whether they're even going to be able to be viable going forward in the future. There's a lot of people that haven't been able to answer that question yet. So there's a lot of challenges, and this is a tough industry. It's very competitive. It's becoming more competitive, and like I said, it takes everything just to manage the practice on a daily basis, let alone trying to keep up with all the new trends, all the new information, and what they need to do. I mean, you've got your surprise billing act that was just passed. Now we've got to be concerned about all of that. And we will need to be concerned as physician practices too, because eventually, if you're an out-of-network physician, that's going to, that's going to have an issue. You're going to have issues there.
Yeah,
So, even physician practices need to be aware of these laws that are changing, even transparency laws. Right now, it only affects the hospitals. You and I both know physician practices are going to be forced to do that eventually too. It's just
yeah.
a matter of when.
You're absolutely right. And it's really interesting because certain states are already enacting laws like Colorado, where
Yeah.
they're already forcing physician practices to push forward their pricing transparency to their patient markets. But you raised a great point. I blogged a little bit about that yesterday, and it was absolutely amazing to me. I pushed out the interim final rule that was released by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services at the request of the Biden-Harris administration regarding the surprise billing. And to your point, it talks about in-network providers. And what people need to realize and recognize with this specific act or bit of legislation that's coming out is that even though it's released by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, this will apply to commercial payers as well, if not almost immediately in the very near future.
Yeah, well, you've got all these commercial payers that contract with the federal government doing these, whether it's Part C, Part D, I mean, doesn't matter what part they're doing, but once they start contracting with the federal government, then those plans are required to fall under the regulations as well. So, for the most part, if you're dealing with, Medicare patients, any type of Medicare patients, you have to comply with federal laws. Same thing with Medicaid. So, there aren't too many regulations out there that providers don't need to be aware of and can ignore.
Yeah. And, you raised a good point about, being regulatory guys, because I mean, that's what I am. I mean, obviously, I grew up in this industry. I started, the first few years, doing practice management and, trying to use the skills that I, acquired in college for accounting and finance and, basic principles of management. And I remember when I got into healthcare, everything that I learned in college went right out the window because healthcare, even back when I started doing this in, my first real job in healthcare was in 1989, working at the front desk of a multi-specialty practice in Margate, Florida. And, before I transitioned up to Georgia. And, I will tell you, it was really interesting because I was answering phones, I was scheduling people, and then all of a sudden, it got hoisted onto me that I had to learn to do billing. Now, we didn't have anything called coding back in 1989. We had billing, right? And everything was based on usual, customary, and reasonable. And you rendered a service, you put it down on a sheet of paper, you sent it off to the billing address that the insurance company gave you, and you got paid, right? And
Yeah,
and you got
yeah,
paid pretty well. And then we moved into, when I transitioned, out of high school going into college, and in 1992, I was introduced to something called the RBRVS, the discount fee for service structure. And I thought to myself, because, I was pre-med and I was going to medical school, that was my goal, was to be either an orthopedic surgeon or a neurosurgeon. I started looking at it and I said to myself, holy crap, how is it possible that I'm going to go and amass $500,000 probably in student loans for another 15 years of education and come out and be reimbursed under something called a discount fee for service? And that's when I pivoted and I said, I got to figure out something else to do in healthcare. So, that's sort of like the evolution. Like you said, you had a separate career prior to coming into healthcare. And the point that you were talking about was the continuation of reading and knowledge and gaining an understanding for all of these different things that are going on. It's no longer a matter of just being able to focus on the business of medicine as a practice leader or a business leader, right?
right, right, exactly. Absolutely. So there's an awful lot that you have to stay on top of. And if you're, I mean, I'm a generalized practice management consultant. So it's kind of like every area is my expertise, or it needs to be. And if I don't have the answer, as I tell my clients, I will get you that answer and provide you citations and supporting documentation to show that it's not an opinion. This is the correct answer, and here's why.
Yep.
So yeah, staying on top of all that information is it's a feat in itself.
Yeah, it's almost a full-time job.
Yeah.
So that takes me to your latest venture, your newest role. By the way, I know I've congratulated you, but I'll congratulate you on the air. Um, David, just this past year, has assumed the presidency role for the National Society of Certified Healthcare Business Consultants, better known as the NSC HBC. So, David, could you talk a little bit for our viewers about the society, and what it's really about and why it's such a powerful organization for people to engage with?
Sure, sure. So the NSCHBC, oh geez, I'm trying to remember how many years old it actually is. I'm guessing it's about somewhere in the neighborhood of 11, 12, 13 years old. It came about from three other organizations that were, two of them were consulting organizations of consultants, and then the other organization was a certification arm for one of those organizations. And we had decided to roll them all into one since we all pretty much had the same mission, and became the NSCHBC. So we formed that group, and I've been a member of one of the, well, actually all three of the previous organizations since I can remember, the first year I started doing this, and have been fully involved and immersed in it ever since. To me, it's the largest organization of its kind in America for healthcare consultants. It's relatively well known, although we're becoming more known. It is a very good mentoring organization for consultants. So, for instance, if you're starting up a consulting practice, if you join the NSCHBC, every one of our members is readily available and willing to share information, documents, experiences, you name it. We're a mentoring organization. So we help bring others up to where we are at this point. So no different. When I joined 25 plus years ago, I had a couple of people that were mentors of mine that are still great friends today. And we see each other at all the conferences, all the workshops, and we still exchange war stories, tools, all kinds of things. We have a listserv that is second to none. Anybody has a question, they put it out there on the listserv, and sometimes within moments, they've got answers. No reason to reinvent the wheel. Somebody's already done it. So, you can take those documents, take that information, make it your own. It's a great organization, and literally, even when COVID came, and then everybody's getting all these stimulus funding and loans and so on, our listserv was second to none in providing information, guidance to all our colleagues and associates and consultants, informing them of what they needed to do, how they needed to handle things, how they needed to advise their clients. And you have to understand, our organization, it has all kinds of consultants in it. We've got American health lawyers that are members. We've got practice management consultants, coders, clinical documentation educators. We've got some physicians that are members. We have administrators that are members. You name it. We've got people all across the board because there's all different types of areas of consulting in healthcare, whether it's medical, dental, veterinary, you name it. I mean, we've got experts from all over the world or all over the nation that have these expertise in different areas of healthcare. So somebody knows this information. A lot of CPAs, a lot of enrolled agents, and things like that. So we've got all these people that assist healthcare professionals in running their businesses, doing their jobs, defining their future, developing their careers. And we want to be able to provide the resources and tools to those consultants so they can do their job better and help all these independent practices and healthcare professionals stay in business and stay viable. That's
Yeah.
our job. That's our task. That is our mission.
And I will tell you, as somebody who is a member of the society, um, you know, there's no shortage of organizations that people can go to and join, right? AHEMA, AHA, AAPC, HCCA, MGMA. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I will tell you, as somebody who is a member, and I'm trying to be as unbiased as I can, right? Because I'm a member of the American Health Lawyer Association, I'm a member of HCCA, I'm a member of the AAPC. And for me, it starts to get really expensive. Obviously, with the number of certifications that I hold, the hours of continuing education that I'm required to have, and for me, it came down to joining one management association, and um, I didn't have to look much further than NSCHBC. Number one, because one of my, several of the people in our organization at Doctors Management, they're all members of the society. Paul King, our former CEO, who's the chairman of the board, he's been part of the association, I think, almost as long as you have, maybe just even a couple of years more than what you were, because I think he was part of one of those original organizations that was part of it. But my point is, you brought up the listserv, and I agree. Our listserv that the society has is second to none. I can't think of a listserv where you are getting instantaneous feedback from well-respected attorneys, well-respected thought leaders in the business world, well-respected CPAs, consultants with vast knowledge across the spectrum. And it's always amazing to me to see just the generosity and the willingness for information dumps and information share. And you brought up COVID. Um, I will tell you, what helped me help my clients survive all the regulatory things that were going on with the stimulus that was coming out, the difference between that and the HHS money that was being given out, all of the 1135 waivers, all of the little nuanced things that were taking place. If it wasn't for that listserv, it would have been so overwhelming to be able to provide clients with accurate, up to date, and authoritative information, to your point.
Absolutely. No, little tools like that are so advantageous to, those of us that work in this business. We need whatever we can to feed us information on an automated basis so that it puts it in front of our face. It's no different than, I know you as well as I probably subscribe to God knows how many listservs and newsletters, whether it's the multitude that come from, the federal government and CMS, and then you've got, we operate in all 56 U.S. territories, so we've got notifications coming from every Medicaid program. We even look at state insurance commissioner websites because we're dealing with contracting and payers all over the country every single day. So you have to stay on top of this stuff and understand exactly what's going on if we want to be at the forefront of everything for our clients. So you've got to constantly stay on top of that, keep pushing that information or going out and grasping that information, gleaning as much as we can in order to stay on top and still be considered the utmost professional and expert in the field in order for our clients to trust us that we know what we're doing.
Yep.
And you said it as well, certifications. We've got so many certifications, you spend a fortune on membership, but then on top of that, you've got to spend all this money on CE in order to keep those certifications every single year. in order to be considered an expert. And it's just part of the job. I mean, you've got to balance everything out. You juggle all those balls that are in the air, and hopefully you don't drop anything. And sometimes we do. I mean, we're human just like anybody else. So there's just so much coming down the pike. It's hard to fathom. And knowing what potentially or will be affecting our clients in the future, trying to keep your eye on those balls that are being bounced everywhere, and trying to make sure that when it is going to affect your clients. It's a lot of work.
There's no doubt to that. A couple more things about the society, and then we could move on and talk about you and your professional role as a healthcare consultant, as a healthcare leader. You talked about certifications. The society offers a certification.
Yes, it does.
Can you talk just a little bit about what that certification entails? Because I think some of the listeners may get a little bit spooked, right? Because they start hearing CPAs, lawyers, these kind of people are active members of the society. And they may think, oh my God, I have to have a law background, or I may have to have an accounting background. And that's not necessarily the case. Is that a fair statement?
That is absolutely a fair statement. So let's tell you the story about this consultant that started 25 years ago that had zero healthcare experience. So I was in food service for 20 plus years as an executive VP of a national organization. I left that organization because I was traveling 4 days a week, 52 weeks a year, didn't see my kids half the time, and just traveling everywhere. So I decided that, hey, I didn't want to do that anymore. I went to go work for a gentleman that had a consulting firm. And all I did for the first probably 3 or 4 years, I helped out, but I basically educated myself. So here I am, somebody with zero experience in healthcare. I knew business. I mean, I knew a P&L, knew how to read it, knew how to deal with it, knew how to evaluate it, and knew what to do based on what the numbers told you. So really all I needed to do is learn medicine. That's a bigger task than, most people think. So, went through and got certified as a human resource professional, got certified as a coder, an auditor, got certified in compliance, both an officer and consultant, got certified in HIPAA, MACRA, MIPS, certified healthcare business consultant, you name it, just went out and got all those certifications. So in addition to that, the certified healthcare business consultant, which is a certification that the NSCHBC has, basically is we have a study course, a review program, as well as, it can be in person or it can be done from afar on your own. But you don't have to be a CPA. You don't have to be a consultant. You don't have to know an awful lot of anything, but you have to be able to be smart enough to study and be able to take an exam. And the area that the areas that exam covers are everything from operations to coding, to taxes, to retirement, to accounting, to compliance, to, even things like we cover OSHA, we cover the categories of MACRA and MIPS. I mean, we cover so many areas that, when you're done and you pass that exam, you are considered an expert because we've educated you with the review program and with the test or the exam on all areas that either a dental or medical practice would have to be aware of in order to operate properly. And this basically educates and teaches a consultant. They may not know everything off the top of their head, but at least they know enough information so that they have enough information in their mind so they know where to go look to glean more information, to get more detail, or they know to ask somebody else in order to glean more information and get more detail.
Yeah, they get a foundation, basically,
yes,
is what they're getting.
It gives you a foundation.
Yeah.
And then you can get certified in more detailed or specific areas to build on that certification that the NSCHBC has. Now, one of the things that we're doing that we made a change on most recently is that we're developing a certificate program whereby, let's say, you're not a finance person, you're not a CPA, but you want to get a certificate like in healthcare operations. We're going to provide that portion of the exam so that you can get a certificate. Now, you won't be able to use the identification CHBC, which is a certified healthcare business consultant. In order to be able to have that certification and be able to utilize it, you have to have the full. You have to take the full exam and pass.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah. Otherwise, you can either go through the financing and tax side, or you can go through the operations side and have a certificate program. If you end up taking both of them, it gives you the two certificates, and chances are you can probably pass the exam if you pass both those certificate programs. So that'll be coming out in the near future and will be available to a lot of people out there that were afraid of getting into the tax and accounting. I mean, I'm not an accountant. I know not a lot about taxes other than what I do for my own company and myself. Retirement planning, I know a little bit, enough to know that how to choose my own retirement plan for my business and things like that. But from the standpoint on dealing with that every day, absolutely not. I don't have that expertise. I have enough that I know who to go to ask questions and ensure that my clients get the proper information.
Yeah,
and that's what it's all about.
And I think that's a great overview. When I first got into healthcare, I worked for a company called the Medical Management Institute. This is dating
Remember it well.
Yeah, dating all the way back to 1994, I think or 1995 is when I started with them. Yeah, 94 I came out of college. So 1995 is when I started with them. And one of the requirements that was pushed upon us then, because we were practice management consultants in addition to providing coding and Medicare rules and regulations, was we had to go through the MGMA to get the Certified Medical Practice Executive credential. And I remember when I first read the curriculum on that thing, I said, I'm getting another job, man. There's just no way, because it was 3 days of just intense scrutiny, the multiple choice portion, the narrative portion, for writing, your essay, and then the verbal, where you had to go before members of their committee and answer questions. And I think a lot has changed. The MGMA is still, a great organization. But I think with the emergence of organizations, even though NSCHBC focuses on the consultants and making consultants better consultants and more powerful and knowledgeable and more beneficial to their their clients. I think so many other types of individuals in the healthcare space are migrating to this organization, because there's a great presence out there now on LinkedIn, which I love LinkedIn. I know some people are getting frustrated with it because we're starting to see a lot of personal things that are being posted and some of the political nonsense. It is. And, I try to tell people all the time, you just have to control your feed. If you don't like what you're seeing, block it, get rid of it. And then it doesn't show up in your feed. The more time you spend on LinkedIn, the more things that you actually put into your feed, the better off you are. But anyways, I'm not trying to talk about that. Again, I think anybody who's looking for a management society, a place to be able to get not only practice management guidance and tips and knowledge, but also to learn about health law, regulatory compliance, OSHA, HIPAA, OIG, dental practices. NSCHBC is a society that you will never regret joining. I will tell you, the day I get to notice in my email that my dues are coming up, like a month down the road, it actually goes right over to the accounting office and they pay it on the same exact day. I'm just not going to let my membership lapse. Now, I know I still have to take my certification. I've been a procrastinator on that, and I'm going to find a way to find time to sit down and study and sit down. My goal is by the end of 2021, I will take, and fingers crossed, I will pass the CH.
All right, I'm going to hold you to it.
I am. I'm saying that on air right now. All right.
Awesome.
So I think we've talked a lot about the society. Obviously, there's a reason why David was elected to be its president. You could tell his passion for the society. You could tell his passion for the members. There is an annual conference coming up. It's the winter conference. I've actually spoken at it in the past. Terry Bowden, former coach for Auburn University and for Clemson, former analyst for the college football season, gave a great keynote address there. And just so many other incredible speakers that the society is able to bring for its members. So I know that's coming up in the winter this year. Is it in December, David?
It is in January, and it'll be down at Sanibel Island this year.
Wow, fantastic. So for those of you that are getting buried in the snow in Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, the whole eastern seaboard, pack a bag and head down to sunny South Florida. So in the little bit of time that you and I have left together, I've talked about the fact that you're a very well-respected healthcare consultant with obviously a national reputation. I mean, you have clients in all 56 U.S. territories. So what is the biggest area or biggest areas that you're really focusing on these days for your clients?
Well, for the most part, probably the areas that we're spending most of our time in over the past couple of years, and it seems to be ramping up even more so, is really with revenue cycle and, contracting and provider enrollment is a big thing. I mean, every day we've got more and more new clients being referred to us for this type of work, especially with contract negotiations. A lot of people think, there's no hope in negotiating with the insurance companies, but there is if you do your homework. There's a lot of due diligence and a lot of pre-work that needs to be done before you go knock on the door of the insurer and ask them for more money. You have to gain leverage. So it's all about gleaning that leverage and knowing your practice as much as you possibly can, because honestly, the payers know your practice better than you do, or better than the physicians do. So you really need to, glean information, understand where your leverage is, and then you go after it. So we've been doing an awful lot of contract negotiations, and it's all about finding ways to convince those payers that you're a good partner, being able to prove it to them, and being able to justify the increases. There's no guarantee that you're going to be successful whenever you go into contract negotiations, because you have no idea what you're going to have for leverage. So It's all about doing that due diligence to build that. And then on top of that, credentialing and contracting just gets more difficult every day. You've got more and more networks and plans that are closed. Florida, try getting credentialed in Florida. It's almost impossible. There's so many plans that have closed networks and so on. So we do an awful lot for that. I mean, we probably credential 6,000 providers on an annual basis. A lot of work. So we have to stay on top of that. And with all the changes, just trying to keep our clients aware of what's going on. We keep coming back to the topic of COVID, but we've never done so much work in telemedicine the past 2 years. I've been pushing telemedicine for 10 years, and all of a sudden it blows up because COVID comes. That wasn't hard to predict. It's not going away, and every payer is going to pay for it. So if you're not doing telemedicine, you should be, and it augments, your top line revenue stream. So you have a different revenue channel you can tap into.
Absolutely. And one of the things, while we're on the telehealth topic, keep in mind, in the majority of states where they've actually ended the restrictions on the 1135 waivers, they are no longer allowing telehealth as an audio only service. So if you're going to continue providing those services, which I think is a wonderful value add for your patient population, I think it also helps with those practices where it's taking an extraordinary amount of time to actually get the patient physically into the practice. that telehealth is a great option for people to engage, but it cannot be audio only. It's got to be interactive. And that's one of the things to keep in mind. Florida, DeSantis pushed that out the other day. Georgia, Kemp has done the same thing. Abbott has done the same thing in Texas. And I suspect that we're going to start to see a lot more of these states. I know a lot of folks keep talking about the Delta variant. And obviously, I'm not downplaying that in any way, shape, or form, because, anytime you have a mutation to a virus, to a bacterial infection, whatever it might be, we got to take it seriously. But here's the good news. Even with the Delta variant right now, it is still a 99.9 cure rate. So that's the good news. So the Modernas, the Pfizers, the Johnson and Johnsons, these things are actually working. Now, it was kind of interesting talking about reading. I probably read 25 to 30 hours a week just to kind of keep up with stuff. And I don't just limit my reading to healthcare because it's such a narrow space. I try to look at things from other industries. And I talked about this with another guest on another podcast, Ken Hertz. But it was really interesting. I was looking at a study that just came out of Israel where they were talking about one of the COVID injections. It was either Pfizer or Moderna, that the efficacy rate now is down to about 68% because of, the mutations. So again, we want to stay on top of this stuff. We don't want to let up. But at the same time, we need to be able to get back to business and get people working and get, our economy reestablished to where it was pre-COVID, because I think we had a pretty strong economy prior to COVID hitting. David, one of the questions that I get asked by listeners, and it's been coming up quite a bit lately, and I love the engagement that the listeners have with myself and the guests. Any particular reading that you're doing right now? Any particular books of interest that you feel you want to share with our listeners?
Well, a lot of the reading that I do are a lot of articles and newsletters and things like that. But a couple of books that I've been reading one is The E-Myth Revisited. Talks about why most small businesses don't work and what to do about it, that type of thing. So, I do reading, entrepreneurial reading, things on small business, things on healthcare, that type of thing. Another book that I enjoyed was Leaders, Myth, and Reality by General Stanley McChrystal. And then one of the other, let's see, where is it? A book that I thought was very good that I recommend to any physician to read is called Establishing, Managing, and Protecting Your Online Reputation by Kevin Foe, MD. Great book. I recommend it to every one of my clients. It's all about protecting your online reputation, and given, the advent of the internet and how much reviews mean to everybody nowadays, and the fact that you really can't control what people put out there, you need to honestly learn how to manage your reputation. And that goes for everybody. Even consultants have to manage their reputation. Whether you get a Yelp review or any other type of review, Google reviews, you need to manage that. And it's also how you address those that are negative comments or reviews so that you don't look like a jerk, and yet you address it appropriately so that, your other readers or other potential clients or even patients can see that you're still an utmost professional, and you're handling somebody that may be being a bit of a jerk or unreasonable based on either a patient visit or, a client that didn't have a good experience with you. You need to handle that professionally. So
Absolutely.
that's probably one of the best books I could recommend at this point in time, just because the internet's going to have a lot of influence on a lot of business going forward.
Absolutely. I think that's fantastic insight and a wonderful recommendation for any of our listeners, especially physicians and or those who sometimes have knee-jerk reactions to really sit down and process and be methodical, because I tell people all the time, once you put something out there on the internet, even if you delete it, it may be too late because it leaves a digital footprint and things just don't go away. The one book that I am reading right now is called Financial Management for Medical Groups. And this is a resource for new and experienced managers. And again, when we started the podcast today, we were talking about the fact that so many people come into healthcare as a second industry. Um, and the fact that a lot of people that start working in healthcare matriculate through the ranks. Maybe you started like I did at the front desk answering phones, and then you move into the billing, and then somebody thinks, wow, Sean did a great job doing that stuff. Maybe he's going to be a wonderful practice manager, but they get hoisted into that position without any formal training, any guidance, any laying out of expectations by senior leadership, by the owners, by the physician leaders of the group. So this is a book that I strongly recommend. This is in its second edition now. It's available through the Medical Group Management Association. It was written by Ernest J. Pavlock, who's a PhD and a CPA. And again, really, really interesting book, good book. I can't promise you that it's going to do anything to keep you wide awake throughout the course of the day, or but it's a wonderful resource. All right. So with that said, David, is there anything else, any trending issues, anything that you would like to leave our listeners with today before we sign off?
Well, I appreciate you having me on your podcast, Sean. Much appreciated. Much success to you and this podcast. I've been listening to it, and you've got some good guests on there and some great information. My suggestion for most people, whether you're looking to get into the industry or you're a provider that's working in the industry, stay on top of as much information as you possibly can. Surround yourself with experts. All of us can't be an expert in everything. So if you're going to work in any industry and you aren't an expert in the area that you're looking to deal with, whether it's insurance, whether it's compliance, no matter what it is, the goal is, in order for you to be successful, it's all about surrounding yourself with experts that are going to help you achieve the success that you want. Vet those experts properly. They should all work with you to improve whatever it is that their task is to improve. So if they're there to help you improve your top line and bottom line, then by all means, both of those should see movement in a positive direction. Otherwise, find somebody else. You can't be an expert at everything. And if you want to be successful, you need to find the expertise to help you get there. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. But if you ask for help and then you don't listen to that help, well, that's the epitome of craziness, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
narcissism at its finest.
Surround yourself with those experts and let them help you be successful. And if those experts aren't helping you get there, then terminate them right away and go find somebody that will. There's plenty of people out there that know what they're doing and can help you become successful and become viable as a medical or dental practice.
Outstanding advice and great takeaway message for our listeners. All right, everybody. So again, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen into the Compliance Guy podcast. My name is Sean Weiss, and I would like to once again extend a very special thank you to my very, very special guest and my special friend, David Zetter. David, thank you so much again for taking time out of your busy day and for joining us. And I do hope that you will consider coming back on the show again down the road and talking to our guest about some of the new things that are going on in the healthcare landscape to keep people abreast of the changes and to help them keep understanding what the expectations are that the carriers and the different payers have set for us in order to be able to play the game that they've established.
Sounds great, Sean. Be happy to.
All right, y'all. So again, thank you, and we look forward to you joining us on another episode of the Compliance Guy podcast.